every single morning waking up and knowing that I was going to spend the next 8 hours doing something that I just didn't want to do. I was withdrawn. I was disconnected from myself. I was in survival mode.
Expectations on outside of our own control. Whether those things meet or don't meet our expectations, what can I control?
We have to prove ourselves, that we have to stay and that we have to tolerate it. And when it comes to leadership, you have to toughen up and you have to stay in this situation to prove that you're a good and tough and capable leader. I lost my job and I was an executive in that job and immediately started interviewing again because that's safety. And every time I went for the interview, my stomach would churn because deep down it wasn't what I wanted.
We have an opportunity to allow you the space to read the letter to your former self.
Hey you, I know you're exhausted.
There are moments when everything looks fine on the outside, but on the inside, you're slowly burning out. You're still showing up, still performing, still being seen as successful, but something no longer fits. My guest today is Suzannah Kelly, a leadership coach who spent over 2 decades in senior HR and executive roles before an unexpected interruption forced her to face a hard truth. When does staying stop being strength and start costing you who you are? In this conversation, we talk about burnout as information, identity beyond title, and why midlife isn't a crisis but an awakening. If you're exhausted in a way rest doesn't fix, this episode is for you. I am happy to have you here. How are you?
I am happy to be here and I am good. I'm good. Nice to see you, Dwayne.
Yeah, it's nice to see you. I keep going back to that conference we went to in the summertime, and I was just so amazed with the entire setup. An outdoor conference with the tents. It was on such a hot day. The pools were there. The vendors were there. It was such a great experience. I've never forgotten it.
It was so fun. It was really fun, and I really give them credit. And we should call them out, Future Fest HR, for doing something different. Right. This wasn't your traditional conference. It was, as you said, sort of outside, a little Miami vibes. There were flamingos on the swimming pool, but it was a really great, I thought, intersection of sort of leadership, HR leadership and creativity. It was fun.
Yeah, it was really fun. And you were fun too on the panel. You you did your thing. So it was really cool to see you there. So tell us about you. What are you doing right now? What's your sense of being at this time?
I think I can sum that up in one sentence. What am I doing? I am doing my heart's work. That's what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So to give that a little bit of flavor though, I am a leadership coach and facilitator. And so I spend my days coaching professionals to elevate their leadership in various ways. And I also do a lot of leadership development, facilitation of workshops and training. So those two things go hand in hand. And I also do a lot of DEI work as well. Maybe just sort of by way of background, I've spent, many, many years, and happy to answer this question if this comes up, but, spent many, many years in the HR space as an HR professional. And the work that I love to do is helping leaders, professionals, be better leaders. And so I do that in 2 spaces. One, I help organizations create inspiring and dynamic cultures and help them develop their leaders. And 2, I also do this work in the space of women. And I'm passionate about both and super passionate about the second.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Being in HR, how did leadership intertwine? Because typically HR, and when you think about leadership, like skilling people up in leadership, it doesn't come off as that synonymous thing. Like leadership is usually tied to operations or other business objectives, but typically not HR. How did that intertwine for you?
Well, I think HR does have a strong role to play. I mean, HR is in the business of people. I think that though that I've had fantastic opportunities to work in organizations where the people that I reported to, and typically they've been CEOs or general managers of those businesses, saw the importance that people play in an organization, that it wasn't just about financial KPIs, it wasn't just about revenue, but in fact, those things only happen through people. I think many organizations get it wrong. They think that the numbers come first and then it's people. In fact, it's people first. And when I boil it down very simply, when you treat people really well and elevate their leadership and allow them to grow and allow them to be their best selves and to expand and to thrive and to flourish and all those words, your profit will come. So as an HR professional, and I've been an HR executive, my role was to set an agenda for how can we build a culture that allows people to thrive.
And are you still in that role now?
No,
What happened?
no, no. Well, I spent 25 years in HR and I loved it for a very long time. I moved here many, many years ago and a few decades ago. And, it was a field that I found myself in. It wasn't something that I actually thought about intentionally getting into. But way back when, as a very young woman, somebody said to me when I was working as an executive assistant, training other people on how to use a PC, the introduction of PCs, they said, you're really good with people. You should think about going into HR. And so, not knowing any different, I said, oh, okay. And off I took myself to go and get a designation in HR. And so, found myself in this career that I actually found alignment with. And for many, many years and a couple of decades, really enjoyed. I think I was lucky. I had the benefit of working for fantastic organizations that, as I said, saw the value of people and allowed me the space to grow myself as a leader and also to grow others. An example of that is I, worked for someone who 15 years ago said, let me pay for your coaching designation. I really see that you'll be a fantastic coach. I had the opportunity to really grow wings and loved it for many, many years. And as I think about many of the people that, perhaps came into my orbit during that time, and I see where they were then and where they are now, I feel good about the fact that I played a small part in their leadership development. Fast forward, though, a couple of decades, and I started to just really disconnect from the work. And as I look back, and this was, rewind maybe 4 or 5 years ago, as I think about that experience and really what caused the disconnection, I think it really came down to the culture that I happened to be in at the time. And, this is the work of HR. It's so important that you create a culture that people feel good in. And I started not to feel good. I started to feel invalidated. I started to feel that my voice wasn't heard. I started to feel that my work wasn't seen. And this quiet voice inside of me started whispering, something's going on. But of course, that whisper is a whisper until you really start listening to it. And so in the busyness and the madness of getting up every day and getting ready and getting to work and getting on the 401 and getting to meetings, it's really easy to ignore that whisper until one day something happens where you realize I can no longer ignore that voice. And that happened for me. And that's what caused the change.
You had this certain tone when you were talking about leadership and the impact you've had throughout your career on certain people that you hope took something away from it. When you started to talk about that experience going in a different direction to the point where you didn't feel as valued or as seen and you were hearing that voice, I noticed your tone changed. You slowed down a little bit. What sort of memories, if you could kind of unpack that, what sort of memories were you kind of going through in that moment? What were those experiences?
I know what it is to feel good and validated and to feel that you're flourishing and thriving in a role. I know what it is to feel that your work has merit and to feel connected to purpose. I know what it feels like to know that you're in alignment with your values, who you are, and what it is that you want for yourself and for your life. I know that feeling, and it's a great feeling when it happens. I was losing that feeling, and I was losing it rapidly. But the challenge with sometimes in corporate life is as you're losing it and you've spent the last 25 years doing this, you know nothing else but to hold on. And so you're trying to hold on to something that's sort of burning your fingers at the same time. And it's an impossible task. It's an impossible task. And so I got to a point where I knew that I had to make a change. But I think, like many people, what do you do next? Especially in midlife. What do you do next? You've done this thing and you've been successful at it and you've worked really hard to get to this point. I was an executive in my role. You've worked really hard to get to this point. And so what does it say about you? What does this shifting identity mean for you when you suddenly start thinking, I'm not sure that this is what I want moving forward? It's a really complex set of emotions because it's all about identity. Who have I been and who am I going to be? If I let go of this burning thing, who am I going to be? I think this is why so many people struggle. And this is why you find so many people in midlife struggling with, what do I do? What do I do next? And so, you can call it a crisis. Many people do, this sort of midlife crisis. I don't call it a crisis. I call it a midlife awakening. You suddenly wake up and that quiet voice suddenly starts screaming, this is the time. This is the point. This is the inflection point where you need to make a change. And are you going to have the courage to do it? And so that point came to me. The organization I worked for was sold to a US private equity firm. And so I lost my job and I was an executive in that job. And I remember, immediately started interviewing again because that's safety, that's comfort. Let's go back to what we've known. And I was in third round interviews. And every time I went for the interview, so, third round interviews, you're going to assume that you're doing pretty well and maybe this is going to pan out. And every time I went for the interview, my stomach would churn. And I would go to the next interview and my stomach would churn because deep down it wasn't what I wanted. And so I was pushing myself back into an environment that I just didn't want at that particular time. And so I actually withdrew from the interview process. Terrifying. You're a woman, you're in midlife, you're not even early in midlife, and here's a potential opportunity and you're rejecting it. Why? Because in that midlife awakening, what I knew for myself is that the years behind me are elapsing pretty quickly. And as I look at my life moving forward, what I know is that I want to live my life on purpose and I want to live my life on fire and I want to live my life in alignment with the things that make me happy. And what I knew is that that job was not going to make me happy. It was going to be more of what I was already rejecting internally. Mm-hmm. So I withdrew from it. And then I had to really just sit in my own voice and say, okay, you said you don't want that. What are you going to do? And it forced me to really sort of think about, who have I been? Who do I want to be? What do I want from my life? How can I make money doing it? Because, just like everybody else, mm-hmm. I need money. But do you have the courage and the trust in yourself and the self-belief and the confidence to know that you'll be okay? And I had to really sit in that. And I did sit in that. And I had to repeatedly tell myself, Dwayne, Suzannah, you did not get this far to only get this far. You are capable, you are whole, you are resourceful, and there is another life for you out there.
So take us through that whole experience, because ultimately it was an interruption that you didn't expect that imposed this change on you or this new trajectory. However, you were feeling that sense. So if you were to go back and knowing what you know now, and you're able to make, I'm assuming, that comfortable decision or maybe that assured decision, okay, I'm going to leave on my own terms right now and not wait for an interruption. What would have been the signs, or what do you think would have been the difference that would have made you make the decision on your own going back now?
I think what would have made the difference was that I had allowed myself to become buried by the experience that I was having. And so what would have made the difference would have been more awareness around what I was experiencing, and owning and acknowledging the burnout, owning and acknowledging the fatigue, owning and acknowledging that you're not thriving in this. I knew I wasn't thriving, but I wasn't really acknowledging it. I was just surviving. I was holding on. I was getting through. I was pushing through, because that's what you do. You just keep going. But I never took the time to actually stop and say, Suzannah, this is not working for you. This is no longer in alignment with who you are. And I didn't get to that point until the interruption. And suddenly I thought to myself, this is why, because you've lost yourself along the way. But it took the interruption for me to really acknowledge it.
Somebody who's walking in alignment with your story, your journey, and maybe in a situation right now where they've been thinking about it or contemplating that decision, what are the signs? Like, what were those practical things that were happening to you day to day that made you feel as though I'm not being seen, I'm not being valued, I'm not feeling how I want to feel? Like, what were those day to day interactions like? And was being a woman, was there any difference or any kind of experience that made it even worse, or specific to the fact that you are a woman?
I think that the being a woman came after the fact, knowing that I had to look for work potentially, and being a woman, and perhaps even being a Black woman, is another layer of complexity in that journey. Rewind though to what was I experiencing? Well, we can start with, just the exhaustion every single morning, waking up and knowing that I was going to spend the next 8 hours doing something that I just didn't want to do, in a place where I didn't want to do it. I think the signs were, was I speaking up as much as I had in the past? No, because I was shut down. And so my voice, I was silencing my own voice. I was withdrawn, not just from other people. I was withdrawn from myself. I was disconnected from myself. I'm a typically pretty happy, pretty positive, person who, tries to walk through the world with, a certain level of joy. And it just wasn't there. And those were the signs. I was in survival mode. I was on the ceiling watching myself every day, but I wasn't present in my own body. But I didn't realize that until the interruption. It was only when I finally stopped and was able to look back that I was able to say, no wonder. No wonder. No wonder. It's certainly been a time of reflection, and but the great thing about it is, coming out of that, I didn't lose anything. I actually reclaimed a lot. And that's been the most fantastic part about it.
What was the biggest, thinking back in reflection, what did you regret the most about staying in that experience?
So interesting. Somebody asked me that the other day, and they said, why did you stay so long? Why do we stay? We stay because it's comfortable. We stay because it's what we've known. We stay because it's something that we've worked so hard to achieve. We stay because we live in a world where, even though I will tell you that I'm not attached to titles, I really wasn't that attached to my title, but I worked for that title. I worked for that job. I worked for all those perks. I worked for the benefits. And when you've worn a certain outfit every single day for the past, however many years, and then you suddenly have to think about, what am I going to wear next? That's a hard place to be. It's a hard place to be. And there's also a certain reality to life, right? And this is going back to what I said, this is why people stay. It's comfortable. There's a paycheck. It's every 2 weeks. You can pay your bills, right? making the decision not to go back to corporate life initially was terrifying for me. I live alone. I have bills just like everybody else, right? And those things are regular, and they need to be taken care of. It was very scary, and so there were days where I was balancing. Do you believe in yourself enough to know that you can figure this out? And I repeatedly told myself, yes, you can. Yes, I believe in myself. I'm smart. I'm capable. And as I said, I didn't get this far to only get this far. And so I just decided, I'm going to put one foot in front of the other, and I'm going to, build my business. And I've been so fortunate. It's worked out really, really well. And you can look back at the interruption and say, that's the lesson. Let's be grateful for the interruptions. Let's be grateful for them, because we know this. Interruptions put us on a different path, and sometimes the path is fantastic. Sometimes the path is clearer. The interruption gave me clarity. The interruption gave me the clarity that I had been afraid to look at.
Mm-hmm. I imagine it as being like you're standing at the edge of a cliff and you're looking over that cliff, and there's this huge body of water, and you either have a decision. Either you're going to jump or somebody's going to push you. It's a lot easier if somebody pushes you, right? Because you have no choice at that point and you have to dive in. But it's that hesitation of thinking in that moment of jumping, and you think about all the things that can go wrong. And I think in everyday life, a lot of people think about all the things that can go wrong if I decide to leave this security, this safety, this paycheck, and this identity, to walk out of what I built my life on to this unknown, because we don't know what the future holds, but we know exactly what our present and our past has provided us based on our own efforts. What got me thinking, interestingly enough, differently about this was a guest that I had a while ago. His name was Todd Allen, and amazing gentleman. And he said something to me, Suzannah, that was so simple and so obvious, but I never thought about it this way. And he said, organizations are paying you for your value, for your skills. They're profiting off of that. Everything you do is at your own will, your own ability, your own experience. So when you choose to work for an organization, you're saying, I'm not going to benefit from my own skills. I'm going to give those skills to a corporation, this inanimate object that is a profit machine that does not care about me whatsoever. And when he said that, I was thinking, I'm like, we're the value.
We are the value. But I'm going to counter that a little bit. I think for sure, he's 100% correct. But what I know is that there are organizations that want to amplify your value. And I have found my way to, I'm not going to mention them here, but I have found my way to an organization that every single day amplifies my value, that reinforces, that chooses to see me fully, that wants the work that I do in support of their mission, but also wants to see me grow in the process of it. And I love going. I love it every single day. And I've also had the opportunity in the past to work for another organization that was similar. And so I agree. And this is why I think, at the beginning, I said there are organizations that see the work and then the people, but there are organizations that see the people and then the work. And when you can find your way to those organizations, life is beautiful. We all have to work, if you have to work, find one of those organizations. Don't stay in, the organization that gets it backwards and then at the end of the year says, come have some pizza to celebrate the holidays. They've got it back to front. I just want to go back to what you said a minute ago, though, about his quote, which, I think is true. We are geared and wired for negativity, typically as human beings, right? We try to control this, make sure this doesn't happen. We're managing stress. We're trying to avoid. We're trying to control. We're always in this space of managing, controlling, avoiding. So I look at life like this. If this is 0 and this is neutral, and down here is -5, right? And this is that space that I'm talking about, the controlling and the managing, and up here is +5. And I always say I want to live a +5 life. And when you're in an environment that doesn't align with you, you're down here. That's not where I want to spend my days. I want to spend my life in +5, amazing moments, joyful moments. This is why we connect with people. This is why we, save money to go on vacations and have experiences. I want to live up here. But when you're in survival mode, you're down here, and that is no place to live. So I like to talk about, my purpose for the rest of my days is to live a +5 life. And I will no longer ever put myself in a situation or an environment that forces me to live a -5 life.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine that this perspective you have and your experiences leading up to your career shift informed a lot of the work that you're doing today, in particular, as you mentioned, for women.
Yeah. Yeah.
How have those experiences applied to the work you're doing today?
Yeah. So, I like to say that I help ambitious mid-career women, which is, who I was. So I am my own client, if you will, but I help ambitious mid-career women who look successful on paper, but feel exhausted, stuck, or, just sort of quietly disconnected from themselves, reclaim their leadership. It's my own journey. It's my own journey of having to unbind from the experiences that I was having, from the environments that I was in, reclaim their identity, reclaim their leadership, and then shift into the life that they want to live, the life and career they want to live on their own terms. So it was my own journey. And for all of them, there's an inflection point. There's a moment where they realize the pain of staying where I am, and I don't mean physically, but just the pain of of emotionally staying where I am is greater than moving into the unknown. And that's the point where they typically come to me, and I help them move forward.
When you say reclaim their identity first, so it sounds like their stages: reclaim their identity, reclaim their leadership, and how that manifests into the things that they want to do. What does reclaiming their identity consist of?
Yeah.
Like, where do you start with them? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I never like to say that people are lost or, women are lost. They're not lost. They're buried, though. They're certainly buried by the experiences. They're buried by the responsibilities. They're buried by, the journey that they've been on. And so reclaim means let's go back and find, the spark. Let's tap into your strengths. Let's tap into your values. Let's tap into your voice. Your leadership has always been there. The same way I said to myself, you're capable, Suzannah, and you're whole and you're resourceful. So are they, but they're buried. And so it's tapping into those things. It's putting boundaries around certain things to, protect their energy. And it's giving them the confidence to move forward and reminding them that confidence is not about, having to go and find this confidence. You have it, but it comes from the doing. It comes from the action. It comes from taking that one next step. And so helping them to unearth all that has been buried in them for so long, from being in environments where they weren't seen or valued or rewarded or recognized or, shut down. So I help them stop performing and start choosing. What is the life that you want to choose that you're choosing for yourself moving forward?
I can imagine there's some sort of ownership involved in this process. It's societal impacts, environmental impacts, etc. However, what are the components internally that somebody has to be honest with? Like, what would a woman have to be very clear and transparent with herself, a level of self-actualization to say, okay, what role did I play in this?
As women, we walk through the world with a certain, unique set of responsibilities, if you will. I mean, both genders have responsibilities, but I think what I typically see is, we have a certain level of societal conditioning that starts early on. There's a game sometimes that you have to play in corporate life. There's bias that exists, right? You're assertive, I'm aggressive. I mean, I've certainly had that. I've actually been told once that I didn't take up enough space in a meeting. And when I asked, this is actually a true story. When I asked, well, what does that mean? And this was told to me by a man. He said, well, you sit very much like this. You're very contained in the way that well, did you want me to, did you, like, what did you want me to do with these other men that I work with? This is how I sit, right? Now, if you want to say to me, Suzannah, I'd love to hear your voice more often in a meeting, or, I know you've got great ideas and I'd love for you to share them. Well, that's something else, right? But this was not useful feedback. There's societal conditioning. And I think that for women, who often, this is a generalization, but often, play a heavy role in leading their families. There's a moment where sometimes you wake up and you realize in midlife, I've given a lot of myself away. Perhaps to this partner and or this spouse, perhaps to these children, perhaps as the dutiful daughter to these parents. Perhaps the path that I am on, this career path, may not have been one that was of my own choosing. This was something that was expected of me, some combination thereof. And I think also when you live in a world where, women are often criticized for how they look, where they're criticized for aging, where they're criticized for, I guess this is how you look, but what you're wearing. There's a point that comes where you think to yourself, I think I've had enough of all of it. And I want to live my life on my own terms. That doesn't mean throwing everything away, but it certainly means reshaping and shape-shifting into a form that's for once suits me. And so this goes back to that awakening. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does, because I think there's a lot of things that we place, I guess, expectations on outside of our own control. And whether those things meet or don't meet our expectations, we tend to draw our conclusions on how those things are impacting us, whether good, bad, or anywhere in between. However, I feel there's always an opportunity to look internally to say, okay, what role am I playing in this? And I understand what you're saying from the stereotypes and the traditional narrow view or perception of a woman and their role in society or work or in family. However, I don't want us to, in totality, put situations on somebody to make them feel as though they don't have any control.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like there are things we can't control. And it's not to be dismissive to everything you said, and that's not the point that I'm trying to make. Yeah. But it's looking at it through layers to say, yes, we do have those stereotypes and those things that are conditioned to make us look and appear and be perceived a certain way in life. However, what can I control?
Yes. And you did say, and then you did say, what ownership do we have? That was the original question. The ownership that I know that I didn't have, and I see this often with women, is that we lean into the misnomer, if you will, or the myth that staying proves resilience. not taking agency of our own, of our situation, right? So staying proves resilience. Walking away means weakness, that we have something to prove, or that walking away is giving up. That we have to prove ourselves, that we have to stay and that we have to tolerate it to prove ourselves. And when it comes to leadership, you have to toughen up and you have to stay in this situation to prove that you're a good and tough and capable leader. And so I think that's the agency and the ownership that we have, which is to say, no, I don't. I get to be a leader and I get to show up in the world in a way that fits me and works for me. And I actually don't have to buy into those stereotypes. That's the agency. And it's what I didn't do. I stayed. I stuck it out and I kept sticking it out because, as I said earlier, what does it mean and what does it say about me if I leave?
So then you're now at this realization, and for yourself,
Yeah,
you got to this point, obviously. So reclaiming your identity, then, what would be some tangible things that you did to start reclaiming your identity? Were these things that you did on a day-to-day basis? Were there new habits? Were there affirmations? Like, what were those?
all of it.
Okay.
All of it. So first I got quiet. So as I said, I sat in my messiness and I really had to just sort of sit in that soup, if you will, and just think about who had I been and why had I been and what was it about the past that I wanted to honor and bring forward with me, and what was it that I was shedding and leaving behind. I had to really think about my own self-trust, as I mentioned before. And so that meant looking back over past experiences and, really recognizing that I've been here before. I've been through difficult times before, and you've been okay. You've been through difficult times and you've brought yourself along. And so you can do this again. But I think the biggest thing that I did was to just put myself in alignment. What is it that I want for myself? When I truly strip away everything, if I had a magic wand, if I could wave a wand, yes, I have to work, but what is it that I want for myself? And what I wanted for myself was autonomy. What I wanted for myself was freedom. And what I wanted for myself was places and spaces that were affirming and a place where my voice would be heard and valued. And I mean, that was sort of what led me to start my own business. But it was really those things. And so, yes, then the habits come, right? Self-love. Everything starts with self-love. Everything starts with waking up in the morning and deciding, how am I going to live this day? I'm choosing to have a great day. I'm choosing to have a day of my making. It came from journaling. It came from getting all of the thoughts out of my head on paper, which led me to a lot of clarity when you sort of get all of that jumble out on into the written word. It came from removing myself from spaces and places that didn't work for me and putting myself in affirming spaces. And it was amazing that as soon as I started to do that, my world started opening up and amplifying. People ask me, how did you get your business up and running so quickly? I connected with people who were in alignment with me. I put myself in spaces that felt good. I poured into myself. I chose to speak words of affirmation to myself. I mean, I can even show you. I'll show you here on my cork board. So this picture, that's little Suzannah, 8 or 9 years old. What I know is that once in a while she shows up. And during that time, she showed up, right? Because there's scary times in there. I gave her what she needed. I gave her what she needed to hear. And my world started to really amplify. And the opportunities came because I was back in alignment with myself, with what I wanted. You can't live. And I was in -5. I mean, that's just what I was saying before. I was just living this -5 life, and it just wasn't good for me.
It's interesting how you've scaled it that way in terms of the -5 +5 kind of perspective. And I wonder if some people, it's easier to be in the -5 for some people
Yeah,
because,
yeah,
you don't, part of it is you don't have to take responsibility because you can put blame on a lot of other external things. But then the other part of it is is you don't want to give yourself hope. You know, it's if I put myself in this +5, I'm expecting better of myself. I'm expecting better of the people around me. But if I let myself down and people inevitably let me down as well, it's a really difficult place to be. So I could imagine there's a level of confidence, and I don't know how you scale that up individually. I don't know how you did it for yourself, but there must be a level of confidence that you have to scale up within yourself, because all these things that you talked about really start and begin with having confidence to even believe and
Yeah.
to even think that way.
Doing it scared, right? Going on LinkedIn and saying, I've got a business when, you know that all the people that are looking at it are people who've known you in a certain context for a
Mm,
period of time, right? That can feel a little bit scary because you're sharing your new identity, but you've got to do it. You've got to put yourself out there. Rebranding, you know, ask when people ask you, what do you do now? I've been an HR professional for many years, but I'm a leadership coach. I'm a leadership facilitator. This is what I do. Being asked to speak at conferences or, sitting on panels, right? All things that you have to step into. And step by step by step, confidence comes in the action. It comes in the doing. And you do one thing and it gives you a bit of confidence to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And before you know it, this is actually my life. I've moved it out of -5 and I'm living in +5.
you know, it's that infant mentality, and I love how you just showed 8-year-old Susanna, because I remember listening to a podcast, and I can't remember who was speaking about this, but they said we train ourselves as human beings to become scared and to become less confident. Because when you look at a newborn child, growing into a toddler, they don't have fear. When they are learning how to walk, they get up on their 2 feet, and they try to take those steps and they fall, but they don't give up, right?
And they get up.
They're laughing, they're smiling, and they try it again. I always remember this image, and I have it on video. And obviously, this is the era we're in. We film, our camera rolls when we have kids turn from our dogs and our cars to our kids. And I remember there's this video that I have of my daughter. She's 11 now, but when she was an infant, and when you do tummy time and all that sort of stuff, she was laying on her back. You'd always put the baby on the back and whatnot. And I remember I saw her one day just sitting down, on my couch watching television. She was laying there playing on the floor. And I remember seeing this movement, and it was her trying to rock herself over onto her stomach. So it was the first time she was rotating from her back to her stomach. And I remember I grabbed and I rushed and grabbed my phone, and I could see her doing it. It was like she was almost there, and then she kind of flipped back on her back. And I was like, "You're almost doing it. You're almost doing it." So I was there as that vote of confidence, and she kind of looked around, and then she went up again, and she started to like have these faint little like yells, right? These faint little stresses of like, "I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it." And she finally did it. And I remember congratulating her, and we're just like, "Yay, that's awesome," right? And you can see her face light up, and she's looking around like, "I'm on my stomach. This is a total different view," right? But I always keep that in my back pocket, because when I think about, as we grow older, we tend to be more ashamed and more insecure about attempting things and failing, or trying something and potentially not getting what we want, and then we give up, or sometimes we don't even try. And it always baffles me, and I'm by no means a psychiatrist or a psychologist, so I don't know what that transition is or why that transition happens. But at some point as we grow older, and maybe it's the whole biting the apple sort of thing and gaining reality and perspective, we tend to just not have that same level of confidence, and you're thinking it's the same DNA, it's the same person we were when we were, 5 months, whatever year old, 5 months old. What happened? Why are we in a position now in life, in some cases, where we're just not that courageous anymore to attempt at things?
Well, I think that The ego is frail, right? That's the first thing.
Mm.
But if you work in corporate life, you have lived a life of performance reviews, KPIs, judgment, feedback, right? It's all about, it's almost like that -5 life, right? It's
Yeah.
not, it's all about making sure that don't do this and you don't do that and you make sure you achieve this. And if you had just done a little bit more of this, I would have put you in this box. But because you didn't, I'm going to keep you in this box, right? I mean, it's that constrained environment. One of the things I said coming out of, that experience was, no longer am I a pretzel. I will never pretzel again for anybody. And what I meant by that is, depending on who you work for in corporate life, you're pretzeling yourself to this, to this, to this. Please like me. Did I do a good job? Is it good enough? Is it, that's -5. So much of it is -5.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you find yourself in that +5 life where people, for sure, feedback and coaching is a good thing, but the way in which it's done, and when people validate the work that you're doing and see value for it and want to amplify it and want to use it in ways that that's where you want to be. So I think that fear of failure comes from, as I mentioned, the KPIs, the metrics, the constant scrutiny, the judgment, the performance reviews, all of that. That's where it comes from. Right? And the ultimate consequence, I'll get fired. If I don't do this, I'll get fired. So
Yeah,
we play small.
it's a
We
lot of
play small.
conditioning.
It's a lot of conditioning. We play small.
Mm-hmm.
Organizations that get it right allow you to grow, allow you to develop. It's a whole other environment.
So this place where you are coaching from now,
Yeah.
what in your
Happiness. That place is happiness.
that place of happiness, what
That
in
place
your
of
yeah, and I think this is a good time to really talk about the framework you lead with when you're coaching other leaders to be leaders and to reclaim their identity, etc. What are the areas that you've experienced that are lending itself to the work you're doing right now?
I'll go back to what I said in the beginning. I've worked in really great organizations and I've worked in organizations not so much. And so I know that, day-to-day job satisfaction and job fulfillment is possible. But what I know is that it comes from having an internal level of confidence and belief in yourself. And, over time, depending on where you've worked and who you've worked for, some of that can be eroded. And when that is eroding over time and you're, sort of holding on and in survival mode, you can lose yourself in that. And so often the coaching is about, as I said before, sort of unbinding from that burnout, because that is ultimately what it becomes, is the burnout and the fatigue and the constant pressure. How do you unbind from that? How do you unbind from the people pleasing and the self-doubt that sets in because of that experience? And how do you really think about the expectations that no longer fit fit who you are? So really thinking about how do you move away from, or I like to say, unbind from the surviving and start listening to that quiet voice. Then once you've done that, that's about the reclaiming of the identity, and that's the strengths and the values and the voice and the setting of the boundaries and finding your confidence again. And then only when you've done that can you then shift into, okay, so who is the leader that I want to be, and how do I go back and find that leader that I was? How do I build on that leadership? And so how do you up level your communication and up level your influence, and how do you make decisions with clarity and with confidence, and how do you design your work so that it brings you the fulfillment that you crave? So how do you design the life that you want to live moving forward, and design the work that you want to have moving forward?
How does that specifically work with women? in context of all of those external factors, biases, etc., that are still going to exist even after they've done that self work,
Yeah.
how does that
Yeah.
work with?
I mean, sometimes those environments don't change, right? They are what they are. And, for all of your influence, nothing changes. But what it does is give you the confidence to no longer shrink, to no longer play small, to know your worth, to know that your voice has value, and to be able to make confident decisions around whether or not this is either A, the environment for you, or B, how to navigate it with confidence without losing yourself in the process.
So anyone listening who really connects with your journey, what would you want them to understand right now?
I think what I would want them to know is that staying small or being in survival mode or losing your voice is not the end, and it's actually an opportunity to right size. It's an opportunity to create something fulfilling. It's an opportunity to look at who you've been and think about how you want to live moving forward and how you want to work moving forward. That's what I would want them to know, that there is so much on the other side of discomfort if you're willing to take those steps and take those actions. And the other thing that I think I would want them to know is there is no role, there is no job, there is no organization that is worth losing your health, losing your integrity, or your belief in yourself as a capable and resourceful leader.
Hmm.
Those things are not for negotiation. Your health, your integrity, your self-worth, your belief in yourself, they're not for debate.
Is there anything we didn't talk about today that you'd want to touch on?
I mean, I hope it's evident that I found myself to a place where I wake up every day and I'm so happy with the work that I do. I love my business. I love the fact that I get to help others be, elevate their own leadership. But in the process, I've grown so much in the past 2 years. I mean, I look back and I think to myself, gosh, if you'd stayed where you were, look at what you would have missed out on. So I'm so grateful for the interruption. And I do think that's something that, is a lesson that comes from all of this. It's hard to see it when you're in it, but you will get to a place where you will look back. And we know this intuitively. We do all know this, but you will get to a place where you will look back and you will say, thank you for the interruption. Because if not for that interruption, I might not have experienced the flourishing and the thriving that I've been able to have had during this time. So maybe that just gives people hope. If you are in a situation or you are in a season that doesn't feel good and that doesn't feel aligned with who you are, there's always a better and brighter future.
And I can honestly say for everyone listening that Suzannah is a glowing example of plus five living. You are plus five all the time, all the
I try.
time. I think
I try.
you know how you read Morgan Freeman quotes in his voice in your head? I think I read your emails with your voice in my head because your energy is so infectious. So, um,
It's from
Suzannah,
within, Dwayne. It's from within, honestly.
I
It's
know,
been work.
I
It's
know.
and it's inner work.
But this is a good testament to what that work can achieve. Um, so yeah, so right now we have an opportunity to allow you the space to read the letter to your former
Okay,
self.
I did write a letter. Okay. Hey, you. I know you're exhausted, not just tired, but worn down from surviving a place that slowly convinced you to start doubting yourself. And you kept telling yourself that it wasn't that bad, and that perhaps you should be grateful, and that perhaps leaving means that you failed. But listen to me, and please listen closely. Leaving doesn't break you, but staying would have. And what you felt was a weakness, it wasn't. It was just your body and it was your spirit saying, this is enough. You really weren't falling apart, but you were waking up. And I know that not returning and walking away feels and felt terrifying. Maybe like stepping into air with no guarantee that you'll land. But let me tell you that you do land. And when you do, you begin to build a life that feels so much lighter, so much more joyful. And it's a life that leads you to people and spaces that inspire you and uplift you and reinforce who you really are. And one day, please know that you will realize that this was actually not the end of your career, even in midlife, but that it was the beginning of a life that finally fits. You start to build a new one, and from it, you will see that everything you lived through was a slow burn, shaping you for what comes next. Let me tell you, this experience won't just change you. It will become the reason you can stand beside other women, name what they're feeling, and help them trust themselves through it too. So again, you didn't walk away because you couldn't handle it. You walked away because you believed in yourself and you believed in the life that you were meant to create.
That was really good.
Thank you.
If I can ask, what emotions were you going through when you were writing that?
It's such a mix of emotions. So much that you see in hindsight, of course. There's a part of me that's sad that I allowed myself to experience some of what I did experience and to stay in it, because I should have known better and I should have made different decisions for myself. But you can only do what you know to do in the moment, right? But there's also a part of me that's so happy that I did experience what I experienced because it got me here. And so I'm honoring all of it, the good and the bad. I'm honoring all of it. And I'm really grateful to the woman who put up with that and sort of got through that, because I couldn't be this version of me without her. So it was all just part of the process. So it's a mix of emotions. Mm-hmm. But I guess what I'm saying though is all of the emotions are necessary. Mm-hmm. Right? They're all necessary. The hard parts are necessary. You can't experience joy if you don't know what sadness is. You mm-hmm. can't experience it. Mm-hmm. So you have to go through it all. So
can't have
it's
a plus.
A mix. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say you can't have a +5 if you don't have a -5, right?
Amen. Amen. Yeah.
It was incredible.
And then what comes from that is the awareness, right? So once you know that, the awareness is, am I living a +5 life? Am I slipping? Am I honoring myself? Am I honoring what I deserve? And not letting yourself go back to that -5.
Beautiful. Suzannah, thank you for being with me today.
Yeah, thank you. It was fun.